There's a scene that happens in a lot of homes with toddlers. Mom stands up and walks into the kitchen for just a second, or steps out of the room for a moment, and the child who was playing perfectly fine suddenly looks up, scans the room, and panics. Dad is right there. Grandma is right there. Everyone is willing to hold them, comfort them, play with them. But no, the toddler twists away, pushes people off, cries harder, points in one direction, and wants exactly one person, Mom. And on some days, that feeling is so intense that the second Mom disappears from sight, the whole house feels like it goes into emergency mode. If you're the other adult in the room, it can sting because it looks like rejection, like the child is saying only one person is enough and everybody else doesn't count. But attachment psychology tells a very different story. Most adults explain this behavior in 3 familiar ways. 1, it's just a habit. 2, the child has been spoiled and became too attached to Mom. 3, the child is being dramatic because they know crying for Mom works. And on the surface, those explanations sound reasonable, but they stay at the surface. They describe what the behavior looks like, not what is actually happening inside the child's brain and nervous system. Because in attachment theory, when a young child runs toward one specific caregiver in a moment of stress, that usually isn't strategy. It's a search for a safe haven, the safest place their brain has learned through hundreds, even thousands of repeated experiences of being soothed, held, and calmed. And this is where a lot of parents misunderstand what they're seeing. When a toddler only wants Mom, it does not automatically mean Mom is somehow better, or Dad is losing, or the child doesn't love anyone else. Attachment research has shown for a long time that children can build a whole hierarchy of attachments with multiple caregivers, Mom, Dad, grandparents, babysitters. But in certain moments, especially stressful ones, they often lean hardest toward the person their nervous system has most strongly associated with fast, familiar, reliable soothing. In many families, that ends up being Mom, simply because she has been there more often during the big moments: bedtime, illness, nursing, separation, reunion, comfort, and recovery. So this behavior is usually less about who matters more and more about the child's history of emotional experience. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. Toddlers are not only attached, at the same time, they are entering a stage where they want independence more fiercely than ever. And that contradiction is exactly what makes this age so confusing. On one hand, they want to do everything themselves. They want to choose, decide, push away help, run off, act like they need no one. But that same child can completely fall apart the second Mom leaves the room. That sounds inconsistent, but it's actually a normal developmental pattern. A lot of child development research describes separation anxiety as a common part of early childhood. And in the toddler years, it can become especially loud, intense, and emotional, especially when the child is tired, hungry, sick, overwhelmed, or already near their limit. In other words, only wanting Mom is not usually a sign of weakness. It's often a sign that the child is standing right at the intersection of 2 huge developmental forces: the drive to become independent and the need to feel protected. If you look closely, this behavior has less to do with preference than people assume. It has a lot to do with safety cues. In research on caregiver buffering, the presence of a familiar caregiver does not just matter emotionally in some vague way. That caregiver can actually function as a signal of safety, helping lower stress responses and making the child's system feel more regulated. So when a toddler panics and cries specifically for Mom, what their nervous system may be searching for is not simply the person they like best. It may be the person their body has learned means, when I'm near this person, things feel less scary. That helps explain why this behavior often gets strongest in very specific situations: when the child is tired, sick, leaving home, entering a new environment, meeting unfamiliar people, or coming apart at the end of the day. The same toddler who can happily play with Dad for an hour under normal conditions may still run straight to Mom the moment stress rises, because in that moment, their nervous system goes looking for its most trusted regulator. And if that sounds abstract, developmental psychology has found surprisingly concrete ways to study it. One of the most famous is the still face paradigm, and the later versions adapted for older babies and toddlers. The basic idea is simple. A caregiver interacts normally with a child, smiling, responding, engaging, and then suddenly stops. The face goes still. The emotional response disappears. What researchers consistently found is that children react almost immediately. They try to pull the caregiver back into connection. They increase their efforts. They become distressed. And once the caregiver re-engages, they begin to recover. The point of these studies is not just that children like attention. It's that from very early in life, they are already expecting emotional responsiveness from their attachment figure. So when a toddler only wants mom during a hard moment, that behavior may not just be clinginess. It may be the expression of a very deeply learned expectation. When I'm falling apart, this person responds. There's another layer here that people often miss. Toddlers do not only run to mom to be held. A lot of the time, they also go to mom to read her face. Research on social referencing has shown that young children use the emotional signals of a familiar caregiver to figure out how to interpret situations around them. They look at the face, the tone, the posture, the reaction of the adult they trust most, and they use that information to decide whether something is safe, dangerous, exciting, uncertain, or worth approaching. That means when a toddler enters a loud room, sees a stranger, hears a sudden sound, or faces a new situation, they may not only want mom because they want comfort. They may want mom because they need her face to help them understand what this moment means. That's why this behavior can flare up so strongly at predictable times: leaving the house, entering a new place, meeting unfamiliar people, bedtime, daycare drop-off, illness, major routine changes, the end of a long day, or after a big family shift, like a move or a new baby. From the outside, adults often call it overreacting. But from a psychological point of view, what's often happening is much simpler and much deeper. The toddler's nervous system is too close to its limit, and it is reaching for the person it has most strongly linked with regulation, safety, and recovery. A toddler does not tell you, "I need co-regulation because my nervous system is overloaded." They cry and call for mom, but underneath, that may be exactly what is happening. There is another misunderstanding that shows up a lot in families. People worry that if you keep responding to this behavior, the child will only become more dependent. But attachment research has always described secure attachment in two directions at once. A secure caregiver is both a safe haven and a secure base. In other words, the same relationship that gives a child somewhere safe to return to also gives them the confidence to explore. Children often become more willing to separate when their nervous system trusts that the connection is stable and available. So the thing that helps a child gradually tolerate separation is usually not forcing independence before they are ready. It's building enough security that they can leave and come back without their system going into panic. And this is especially important if you are the other adult in the room: dad, grandma, a grandparent, a loving caregiver who feels pushed away. When a toddler only wants mom, that can hurt, but it should not be read as a verdict on your worth. It is usually the trace of a pattern the child's nervous system has built over time, and those patterns can expand. Children can become deeply attached to multiple people. They can learn that dad is a source of safety too, that grandma is a source of safety too, that another caregiver can help regulate them too. But those pathways are built through repetition, reliability, and enough moments of successful soothing. Attachment research does not say a child should only bond with one person. It says children can form several important attachments, but in moments of stress, they tend to reach first for the one their system trusts most in that exact kind of moment. There is, however, one caution worth mentioning. If a toddler who used to separate fairly well suddenly becomes extremely clingy, or if their distress sharply increases after a major change like illness, moving, starting daycare, family stress, or a new sibling, that may still be a very understandable developmental response, but it is something to pay attention to. And if separation distress becomes so intense that it affects sleep, eating, everyday functioning, or remains unusually strong across many settings without easing over time, that is worth bringing up with a pediatrician or child development professional. Separation anxiety is very common in early childhood, but when the intensity, duration, or impact seems out of proportion, that is when support can matter. So, what is a toddler really saying when they only want mom? A lot of the time, they are not saying, I'm spoiled, I'm rejecting everyone else, or I don't care about anyone but her. What they are saying is much closer to this. I'm overwhelmed. I need my safest person. I need the face my body trusts most. I cannot regulate this feeling by myself yet. I want to be independent, but right now I'm not steady enough to do this alone. That is not a rejection of the whole family. It is often a very raw expression of attachment, doing exactly what attachment is designed to do. So the next time your toddler starts crying, reaches desperately for mom, and seems impossible to settle with anyone else, try to remember that you may not just be looking at clinginess. You may be watching a small nervous system run straight toward the strongest safety signal it knows. You may be watching attachment working exactly the way it was built to work. And what looks from the outside like only wanting mom may actually mean something much deeper inside the child. When I feel shaken, this is the person my body believes will help hold me together. If this changed the way you see your toddler's only want mom phase, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments, when does your child cling to mom the most? Bedtime? Leaving the house? Meeting new people? Or when they're tired and sick? Because these behaviors are deeply connected. And if your toddler also cries hard every time you leave the room, that's not a separate topic at all. It takes us straight into the world of separation anxiety and attachment. And that's exactly what the next video is about.